Hi guys, and thanks again for tuning in to another episode of Everything Local. Today I'm joined by Amanda from Early Daze Doula. Thank you for joining me.
Hi Josh, nice to be here.
Thank you. So tell us a little bit about the business. I didn't know a lot about it when we first met. I've been looking into it a little bit. So why don't you tell everyone a little bit about what you do and where it's all at?
Yeah, for sure. So I started about 11 years ago in England. I was very interested in ways to give mums lots of evidence-based information before they had their babies. It's such a massive thing, having a baby.
Me,
Not just for the mum, but for the dad too, for
Yeah.
the family, and for other siblings. And so started looking into that, and then I discovered this thing called a doula, and I had never heard of them before.
Yeah.
And oh my goodness, I wish I'd had one when I had babies. And I was just like, wow, I would have definitely been booking one. So started looking into training to become a birth and postnatal doula, and so that's what I'm qualified in to do both, and really focused primarily on the postpartum, so looking at supporting mums once they had their babies. And it really means just nurturing the mother. So doula means nurturing the mother.
Okay.
And so that's exactly what I do. So very much the focus once a mum's had a baby is on the baby, and rightly so, they're gorgeous and everyone wants to hold the baby, but who holds the mum?
Okay.
So who looks after the mum? And that's kind of where I step in.
Yeah. So it'd be partly emotional and then also a bit of physical, I would have thought as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what's the process behind it all? So if a mum calls you up, how do you guide them through that, and what are some of the things that you ask to, I guess, better understand the situation?
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of conversation that happens before a mum's had a baby where possible.
Yeah.
When that's not possible and she's already had the baby, like my current client at the moment, second baby, I'm already there, she's had it. So we're in a different space.
Yeah.
But normally it's when the mum's pregnant. So we normally meet up. I go to the home for a 1 hour free obligation, no obligation at all in terms of booking me, but just to get to know me, just to know if I'm going to be the right fit for the family. Because I'm coming in at a time where families are quite vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's a big issue. It's a big deal when a mum's had a baby and come home and exhausted and sleep deprived, and she wants to know that the person coming into her home is going to be there for her. So we meet up to see if we all fit.
Yeah.
And once that happens, I have a sort of getting to know you form. So I find out everything I can about the mum, from her likes, her dislikes, allergies, issues with food, other siblings, in terms of what's her favourite hot drink, so I can pick it up on the way round.
I love that, yeah.
Because
my wife would love that.
Yeah, mums often want a really good coffee or a cup of tea when you come round. So some of her favourite things, and stuff she did beforehand to find out who she was, because very often her identity gets lost once she becomes a mum. Yeah. But she's also a person. Yeah. So once that sort of happens, then I have a contract and we talk about the details of that and what packages people would like to book. So I have 3 examples of packages on my website. Yeah. But I also create bespoke packages as well, depending on what parents want.
Yeah. And how hands-on is it really? Like, it's not like is it a babysitting thing as well, or is it just more to do with the mum, really focused on the mum or the parent essentially?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's very much focused on the mum. Okay. So I'm not a nanny. So, nannies have a different role. They have a different remit. So a nanny's very much there to take care of the baby. So I'm there to look after the mum. So it might be giving her a lot of support with breastfeeding. It's one of the biggest issues that mums face very often, and that's often linked to sleep as well. So what I do is I give lots of practical support around that. Any problems that are coming up, I help navigate that with the mum. And if I can't solve it, I know people who can. Yeah. So there's a lot of referrals potentially to other health professionals or allied health professionals where needed, to psychologists if I think that's needed too. So yes, practical things, bringing meals round, cooking in the mum's home for her, making her lunch, folding laundry, and a lot of it is emotional. Yeah. Never underestimate how powerful and needed that is for a mum.
Oh, definitely. Like you said, you lose your identity a little bit, right? Like I've seen it in my wife. You're so entrenched in the baby, you're pretty much living through the baby essentially, which is good most of the times. But then there's a time where the baby's asleep, and I'd imagine a mum would sit down and be like, okay, well, what's now? Like, what do I do now that the baby's asleep? Yeah. So obviously helping them through that process. And I know that my wife, when I went through that as well, like you're in hospital for the few days after the baby's born, and then they're like, see you later. Yeah. Like, go. Do what you need to do. And like, we didn't research, and there's a lot of things that you can do in terms of reading books and all that sort of stuff. So you're coming in after that point and giving a bit of guidance, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I have lots of access to different referral networks, lots of different information that's evidence-based. I'm a bit of an evidence-based girl. I like my science. I like my facts. But do you know what? Mums can only make informed decisions once they've got all the facts in front of them. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm bringing that in. I've already kind of done the hard graft so she doesn't have to. Because let's be honest, when a mum's sleep deprived, she doesn't want to go through a research paper and have a look at what the most up-to-date information and evidence is on safe sleeping whatever it is. She wants a very quick, what are the tips? What are the things I need to look for? And that's what I do. So I help navigate all that kind of, plethora of information out there to say, well, actually, that's not strictly true. That's not accurate. This is the document that I refer to, so that they know it's evidence-based, and then say, well, this is what it is. But do you know what? Regardless of what a mum makes her decision on, I will still support her. Do you know what I mean? It's informed decision making, but if that family wants to go a particular way, then I'm going to still support them regardless.
Yeah, of course.
That's what I'm there to do.
Yeah, definitely. So let's backtrack a little bit. Like, how did you get into this line of work? Because it's like it's really interesting. Like,
unusual.
It is very like I haven't seen it before. Nope. Personally, like I'm only an early dad myself, but we get to deal with businesses a lot through the podcast and social and all that sort of stuff. So how did you get into something like this?
That's such a good question. So I originally studied law, so I wanted to be a lawyer. So totally different. So I have a law degree with honours, and so that's what I wanted to do. But I wanted to work primarily with women and children, and I particularly love criminology and criminal law. That was my thing, and so loved that. And so I did end up working in that sort of field for about 9 years.
Wow.
And worked in a massive strategic partnership in the UK, preventing and trying to prevent and stop crime from happening and repeat crime. So I was on boards for against domestic violence, against hate crime, antisocial behaviour, anti-burglary. So I can tell you how to break into a house really, really well, because I work alongside the police and I know how to do it.
Let's talk off the podcast.
Let's talk after
that. If I ever can't get in a house, if I do an open home, I'll just come to you, right?
But I know how to protect a house too. That's the important thing. So I know the weaknesses to know what to protect. Because that's what I did. I worked alongside the police, and so it was a fascinating job, and I absolutely loved it. And I think part of it clicked for me somewhere along the line that a lot of the people we were trying to stop from doing these things, they start at where do they start and why do criminals start? And it's based in the family. So I was very interested in prevention rather than cure from a criminology perspective. And so I guess some of what I do now isn't too far out of the reach. I then got involved in doing a lot of social justice work as well. And so very long path to where I got. And then after my second child, looked at this and discovered that I loved it, and suddenly started supporting women to breastfeed and work with the NHS to do that. And so it was kind of like a long convoluted route, and decided not to go back to my corporate job in that role, and decided to change careers.
Yeah, and I guess you would have experienced, the service that you're providing, you would have experienced when you had kids, you didn't have that sort of support essentially. So that's probably how it came up as well.
Yeah, none. So my family lived 5 hours away. So it wasn't a question of my mum being around the corner and popping in to help me cook a meal, or if one of the kids was sick, I had to just plod on and do it. And, you do it, and mums are amazing.
Resilient, right? So resilient
to do it, that you have to do it. But it is true that you need a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
and you do. And if you don't have your village, where does it come from?
Yeah.
And so I'm part of the village, and I also help mums then continue to create that village.
Yeah.
And at the moment, a lot of that village is online. Because face-to-face stuff is just stopping for mums. So, the early childhood centres are not having the face-to-face mother groups. Lots of breastfeeding groups aren't meeting. They're all online. Everything they're doing is online. So where do mums go? It's really tricky at the moment for them.
Yeah. So how are you navigating this whole period around COVID? Like, I think, are you still being able to get face-to-face? There might have been a period where you couldn't have. Like, how are you adapting to everything that's going on at the moment?
It's been tough. I think when we were in lockdown in New South Wales, I just put everything on pause because it was new for everybody. And so we didn't really know what was going to be happening, and I certainly don't want to put a family at risk, especially with a newborn baby.
Yeah, that's right.
If I've got a sniffle, I don't go. That's how strict we have to all be to a certain extent, but especially when it's a new mum. And so, put it on pause for a while. Supported one of my mums online and on the phone, so she was constantly phoning me, and that's something else that I could do. And then when things started, we came out of restrictions and lockdown, then it started to pick up again. And I'd already booked a mum for the end and said, well, look, this is what I can do depending on the lockdown. Let's navigate this together and keep communicating and see what I can do. I can always drop off meals. I can do your shopping for you. You know, if I can't actually physically come in your house, and I can still provide that online support, but it's not the same as face to face.
Oh, definitely not.
It's just not.
That's a human connection. It's totally different, right?
You need that. There's a lot that online brings, and certainly for mums, we need that as well. And I think in the social media world, as we are, it's a great tool. It's a great avenue, but it doesn't negate the fact that mums need that face-to-face contact.
And there's that different connection between a group environment, whether it's mums meeting up versus like a one-on-one, face-to-face. Just you two in your own environment. Other things get told in that space rather than a group environment, right?
Absolutely. So I get to hear a lot about what's going on in that family. They're allowing me to come into inside the inner circle at quite a vulnerable time. So I hold that really gently, and I hold that as a privilege and quite a big responsibility too. So yes, I mean, the emotional side of it, I have referred mums when needed to different services if I felt that they need it, and invited the dads along in terms of having that conversation with him too, to say that I have concerns about this, and this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I'm going to suggest to you guys to do, and lots of different therapies that are out there, you know, in terms of can help mums navigate some tricky things that they're going through. Yeah,
of course.
But mums, particularly at the moment, are more anxious because of COVID.
Oh, definitely.
Without
There's
a doubt.
A lot more risks out there, right?
Yeah, without a doubt.
So talk to me. How does the father get involved, or what's their role in all of this as well? Is there a role for the father in terms of what you do? And you know, and you said that you sometimes bring the dad in and have conversations there. Like, how does all that work?
So, in the beginning, when I'm meeting the mum in a one-to-one conversation in their home, normally the dad's there too. And so I explain how it works, and I say, you know, that if I have concerns that I will call and I will have a chat with him and try and get him engaged and try and talk. And they really appreciate that, I think, being part of it. And I also send information to the dads about how to bond with the baby. So I think that's crucial because there's so much that can be done. That doesn't mean you have to feed the baby, but you can still bond. There's like a million different ways a dad can bond with a baby.
Because you sort of lose that, you lose that at the start, right? Like I witnessed that myself, like the breastfeeding and, you know, me going back to work, like that was, I knew it was going to be tough. You don't realize how tough that is.
Tug on the heartstrings.
Oh, it's crazy, right? Like you just don't, like you're like, wow, I've got to go back to work now, like back to reality. And then, you know, my wife will send me photos and videos and all that sort of stuff. And like my wife's great like that. She keeps me connected with him, and then I, you know, disconnected when I can get home and try and make all that happen. But that's a sort of tough process as well, isn't it?
It's hugely tough. And so the other thing that's hugely tough that is not often talked about for dads is debriefing the birth. So a lot of times dads, especially if they're not prepared, they can have a tough time with that, and they don't know where to go. There's no real safe space for them to go and talk about that. And so I offer that as well. So after they've had the baby, I sit down, and the dad will often be there as well, because I drop in that paternity leave period. And so we'll talk to the dad about how he's processing that, you know, and just some things come out. So it depends on the dad and how open they are willing to be, because some are more open than others. But I find that it kind of allows then a conversation perhaps with their partner to talk about that as well. And then she'll often then say he's struggling a bit. And then I can make suggestions of where to go to perhaps talk about that further. Because it's your partner. And if something goes wrong, it's a big deal for you to watch the person you love the most go through something tough. And you can feel quite helpless. Yeah,
definitely. And I think, you know, being in that environment, you sort of say, well, I don't want to impact my wife. She's already going through enough with the baby. I won't tell her something that's going on with work. And she'd probably be the same as well. I don't want to tell him that I'm struggling because I know that he's working, or vice versa, right? So it's you being in the middle and saying it's okay to have that conversation. Even the most open people, when they go through parenthood, like sometimes you're just too tired. Like, honey, I don't really want to talk about that right now. Just let me sit in peace, right?
Sleep deprivation's a thing.
Oh, it definitely
it's
is.
A thing.
Yeah, it's massive, right?
It's huge.
It takes over your whole mind and stuff. Like I've seen it. People can't even talk, right? You just lose everything.
And that's where the help is, because, you know, a baby can't help waking. They need to feed, and they need to feed frequently, unfortunately. And somebody has to do that, no matter what that looks like. So it's then coming in the next day and saying to the mum, I'll hold the baby, you go back to bed. You know, or I'll prepare dinner and hold the baby and you go back to bed.
It was as simple as like, I'll hold the baby, you have a shower.
Like,
absolutely.
In peace. That often happens. That's something I do, and they love it. They feel just that refreshing, you know, of having 20 minutes to themselves in a shower without having to hold a baby. That's that's great. It's a great way to sort of feel like a human again.
Yeah, of course. So tell us about growing the business, and for anyone wanting to get into this line of work or just business in general, what are some of the things that you've learnt from sort of starting your own business and growing that?
Gosh, network.
Okay.
A lot.
Yeah.
So I'm part of Doula Network Australia. So that is a organisation across the whole of Australia with birth and postnatal doulas. And the fantastic thing about that is that other birth doulas who might not do the extended postnatal work that I do will refer mums to me.
Okay.
So that's happened recently. So the other thing is to market yourself really well. Market. And
it's an interesting line of work to market yourself, though,
it is.
right? Like, I've watched your stuff on Instagram, and like I love the way that you're doing. It's like really genuine. It's just general conversation to the camera. Yeah, I understand that, and I feel the same way in terms of what we do. But it's not like real estate. You advertise the property, or like it's a sold sticker, right? It's totally different in your line of work.
Yeah, it's a service, and it's almost advertising me as the person.
Yeah.
And at first that's hard, right? That's really hard to do. And it's hard for women to do. Like, I think that's a real tough thing for women to get out of their own headspace and go, I am worth doing this for, and I have a lot to bring and I have a lot to offer. And so there was a lot of getting out of my own head to do that, and then going ahead and just going and being confident in what I do and what I bring, and knowing that what I do and what I bring is of great value, because I know I would have valued it. So I think if I can be the person I would have wanted coming to me, then I'm doing a good job. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. And I think that going through, being a dad and having a kid, you start to realize now more how valuable someone like yourself would be and can continue to be moving forward. And I think you've mentioned it's not just about the first kid, it can be the second and third, like as many as you...
I've worked with mums with baby number 4.
Okay.
So and I'm working with somebody with a second baby, and I've just had an inquiry from somebody else with a second baby back to back. So which is great, but it brings a different dynamic in, because the mum that needs that support is slightly different to the first time mum.
That's right.
There is a definite shift.
Different challenges, right?
Different challenges. Yeah, with numbered baby as they come along.
And I guess not same thing, but similar things would happen after the first kid and after the second, in terms of the way that people act and stuff, or the changes essentially. Would that be fair to say? Or?
Look, I think with first time mums, everything is such a shock, right? It's the first time for everything, and nobody can tell you how sleep deprivation is going to hit you.
No.
Nobody can tell you that. I've done my best in antenatal courses to explain that, and even then, when it finally happens, they look at you, they just, no, I don't believe that. And then, oh my goodness, it's exactly as you said it would be. And I'm like, it's every 2 to 3 hours that they wake up. Yeah. And so where are you going to shower? And where are you going to eat? And where are you going to go to the toilet? And where are you going to do all these things? And I think first time mums, that's the big shock. It's the sudden, and it does get easier, of course. As you know, you've got a child.
Well, you just get used to not sleeping, right?
You just partly get used to that, and you find ways to cat nap very quickly and power nap. And then subsequent children, I think, you've been through that, you've survived it, you know you can do it again, but suddenly you've got 2 kids to navigate or 3, and actually it's that extra pair of hands that you miss. And sometimes you've got the toddler, but you forget everything about breastfeeding, so you need somebody to help you nap and say, hang on a sec, I've forgotten everything. But also every subsequent child is different. Of course. Might come from the same gene pool, but oh my goodness. I have two girls that are like chalk and cheese. And they were completely different babies. They slept differently, they teethed differently, they did everything differently. So just when you think you know how it works,
throw out the window.
They throw you a curveball.
Yeah, so I've got a lot to look forward to, I think, with my next one on the way. So.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. Well, look, it's been an amazing journey. I've been watching what you're doing for quite a long time. We appreciate you being on the show and sharing your story. So people connect with you on social, Instagram, Facebook, all those sorts of things. You got a website as well?
I do, earlydazedoula.com.au. Yeah, and my Facebook page, Early Daze Doula, and I'm on Instagram too.
Yeah, well, I'd suggest, guys, just to follow you, just to hear about the things that you do, the videos that you put up. It shares really nice stories about how you're helping people. We're loving seeing everything that you're doing. Looking forward to the next step for the business as well. And with my little one coming, I might actually be in touch with you. So thank you so much for being on the show.
You're welcome. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Everything Local podcast with Josh Saliba. We really want to push the community and showcase the local businesses by providing them a platform to tell their story. Support these businesses by following the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you are a business or know of a business in the local area and would like to feature them on an episode, please contact Josh Saliba with the contacts provided in the show notes. Tune in next week for another episode of the Everything Local podcast.